What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars walks onto a talk show stage expecting a respectful conversation, only to be met with relentless provocation and disrespect from a host who seems determined to tear him down? In just 34 seconds of unhinged commentary, a veteran broadcaster would destroy his own credibility and spark one of the most shocking exits in television history. This is the story of how Jamie Foxx, an Oscar-winning actor, comedian, and musician, found himself in a verbal battle he never asked for. A battle that would expose the ugly truth about a host who thought he could say anything without consequences. The studio lights were bright that evening. Jamie Foxx walked onto the set with his signature smile, waving to the audience who erupted in cheers. He was there to promote his latest project, expecting the usual promotional interview. Light questions, some laughs, maybe a story or two about his career. What he got instead was something entirely different. Piers Morgan sat behind his desk with that look on his face. You know the one. That smirk that says he's already decided how this interview is going to go. Before Jamie even settled into his chair, before the applause fully died down, Piers was already loading his first shot. So Jamie, Piers began, leaning back in his chair like he owned not just the studio, but the entire network. Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? Jamie's smile didn't fade, but his eyes showed a flicker of confusion. What elephant is that, Piers? Your career, Piers said flatly. The audience went silent. You could hear the collective intake of breath from everyone in that room. I mean, let's be honest. You've had, one, maybe two good films in the last 5 years? The rest have been, well, forgettable at best. Jamie shifted in his seat, maintaining his composure. I think that's a matter of opinion, man. I've been fortunate to work on projects I'm proud of. But Piers wasn't done. Not even close. He leaned forward now, like a predator sensing weakness. Fortunate? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been coasting on that Oscar win for nearly 2 decades now. The audience grew uncomfortable. A few people gasped. This wasn't the playful ribbing that sometimes happens between host and guest. This was something darker, something mean-spirited. Jamie's jaw tightened slightly. I don't think I've been coasting. I've been working. Constantly. Movies, music, comedy. I stay busy. Busy doing what exactly? Piers shot back. B-movies? Direct-to-streaming projects that nobody watches? Come on, Jamie. You're better than that. Or at least, you used to be. The smile was completely gone from Jamie's face now. He sat up straighter, his voice calm but firm. What's this really about, Piers? Because I came here to talk about my new project, not to be disrespected on national television. Piers laughed. Actually, laughed. Like the idea that he might be showing disrespect was absurd. Disrespected? I'm being honest. Someone needs to tell you the truth. Your fans certainly won't. My fans? Jamie's voice rose slightly. My fans have been nothing but supportive. They show up. They support the work. What's your problem? My problem, Piers said, his voice dripping with condescension, is watching talented people waste their potential. You had everything, Jamie. Everything. And you've squandered it on mediocre projects and desperate attempts to stay relevant. The audience was fully on Jamie's side now. You could hear murmurs of disapproval directed at Piers, but the host either didn't notice or didn't care. Jamie took a deep breath. You could see him trying to maintain his cool, trying to take the high road. I appreciate your concern, he said, and the sarcasm was barely concealed. But I'm doing just fine. My career is exactly where I want it to be. Is it though? Piers pressed. Because it seems to me like you're just another Hollywood has been, clinging to past glory, unable to accept that your moment has passed. That was it. That was the line. Jamie stood up from his chair, The movement was sudden enough that it startled everyone in the studio. The cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the mixture of anger and disbelief. "You know what?" Jamie said, his voice steady but filled with intensity. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I came on your show as a professional, ready to have a conversation. But you're not interested in conversation. You're interested in tearing people down to make yourself feel important." Piers tried to interrupt, tried to regain control. "Oh, come on, Jamie. Don't be so sensitive. This is just—" "No." Jamie cut him off. His voice was firm, commanding. The voice of someone who had finally had enough. "You don't get to tell me how to feel. You don't get to insult me and then act like I'm being unreasonable for calling you out on it." The studio was dead silent now. Every eye was on these two men. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Piers shifted in his seat, and for the first time, he looked slightly uncomfortable. "I'm just trying to have an honest discussion about your career trajectory." "Honest?" Jamie let out a short, bitter laugh. "There's nothing honest about what you're doing. You're being cruel. You're being disrespectful. And for what? For ratings? To make yourself look tough? To prove you can go after anyone?" "I treat all my guests the same way," Piers protested, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "That's the problem," Jamie's voice rose. "You treat everyone like they're beneath you. Like you're the only one in the room with valid opinions. Like everyone else is just here for you to judge and criticize and belittle." The audience started clapping, scattered at first, then building into sustained applause. They were supporting Jamie, showing him that they saw exactly what was happening. Piers's face reddened. He didn't like losing control of his own show. "Now wait just a minute." "No, you wait," Jamie said, pointing at him. "You've built your entire career on being controversial, on saying outrageous things, on attacking people. And you hide behind this idea that you're just being honest, that you're just asking tough questions. But that's not what this is. This is you being a bully." "A bully?" Piers looked genuinely offended. "That's absurd. I'm a journalist." "You're a talk show host who forgot that the people you invite onto your show are human beings. We have feelings. We have dignity. And we deserve basic respect." Piers stood up now, trying to match Jamie's energy, trying to reassert his dominance. "If you can't handle a tough interview, maybe you shouldn't be doing press." "A tough interview?" Jamie shook his head in disbelief. "Is that what you think this was? Tough questions would be fine. I can handle tough questions. But you didn't ask me tough questions. You insulted me. You dismissed my work. You called me a has-been. That's not journalism. That's just being nasty." The audience applauded again, louder this time. Some people stood up. They were clearly on Jamie's side. Piers glanced at the audience, then back at Jamie. "I think you're overreacting. And I think you're exactly the kind of person who makes this industry toxic," Jamie replied. "You know what the sad part is? You probably think you're doing great television right now. You probably think this is compelling. But all you're doing is showing everyone watching what kind of person you really are." "And what kind of person is that?" Piers asked, his voice tight. "The kind who tears others down because you can't build yourself up any other way. The kind who mistakes cruelty for honesty. The kind who would rather be feared than respected." The words hung in the air. They hit hard because they were true, and everyone in that studio knew it. Piers tried one more time to salvage the situation. "Jamie, sit down. Let's have a proper conversation." "No," Jamie said simply. "I'm done. I don't need this. I don't need your show. I don't need your platform. And I certainly don't need your approval." He started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him. Piers called after him, his voice betraying a hint of panic now. "You're really going to walk out? In the middle of the interview?" Jamie stopped and turned back to face him one last time. "You know what, Piers? Yeah, I am. Because, unlike you, I know my worth. I know what I've accomplished. I know what I bring to this industry, and I don't need to justify any of that to someone who's built his career on being cruel to people. This is incredibly unprofessional, Piers said, grasping at straws now. You want to talk about unprofessional? Jamie's voice was calm but cutting. Let's talk about how you ambushed me. How you invited me here under false pretenses. How you clearly had an agenda from the moment I walked out here. That's unprofessional. The audience erupted in applause and cheers. They were fully on Jamie's side now, and there was nothing Piers could do about it. Piers's face was red now, a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Fine, walk out. But don't come crying to me when you need publicity for your next project. Jamie laughed, a genuine laugh this time. Need publicity from you? Piers, look around. Look at this audience. They're cheering for me to leave your show? What does that tell you? Piers had no response. He just stood there, behind his desk, watching as his show fell apart in real time. I hope you're happy, Piers finally said. You've just made a fool of yourself on national television. No, Jamie corrected him. I stood up for myself. There's a difference. And I think deep down, you know that. I think you know that what you did here tonight was wrong, but you're too proud to admit it. Get out of my studio, Piers said, his voice low and angry. I'm already leaving, Jamie replied. I was leaving before you even said that, because I have self-respect, something you clearly know nothing about. With that, Jamie Foxx turned and walked off the set. The audience gave him a standing ovation. People were cheering, clapping. Some were even chanting his name. The camera stayed on him as he disappeared backstage, capturing every moment of his dignified exit. Then the cameras cut back to Piers, still standing behind his desk, looking furious and humiliated. He tried to compose himself, tried to address the camera, but you could see the defeat in his eyes. Well, he said, attempting to sound casual, but failing miserably, that was unexpected. The audience wasn't having it. Some people were booing now. Others were shaking their heads. The energy in the room had completely turned against him. Piers cleared his throat, shuffling the papers on his desk like that would somehow restore order. I suppose some people can't handle honest criticism. Wrong thing to say. The boos got louder. Someone in the audience shouted, "You were disrespectful." Others joined in with similar sentiments. A producer rushed onto the set, whispering something in Piers's ear. He nodded stiffly. We're going to take a quick break, he announced to the camera, his voice tight. But everyone watching knew the truth. The show was over. Not just this episode, but any credibility Piers thought he had. He'd pushed too far, been too cruel, and it had backfired spectacularly. Backstage, Jamie was surrounded by crew members expressing their support. You did the right thing, one camera operator told him. Someone needed to stand up to him, a makeup artist said. Even some of the producers, though they'd never say it publicly, were nodding in agreement. Jamie took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline settle. He hadn't planned to walk out. He'd come prepared to do a normal interview, to promote his work, to be professional. But there's only so much a person can take. There's only so much disrespect anyone should have to endure, especially on national television. Back in the studio, Piers sat alone at his desk during the commercial break. The audience was still buzzing with conversation, most of it critical of him. He could hear snippets of what they were saying, and none of it was good. He was so rude to Jamie. I can't believe he said those things. Jamie handled that so well. Piers showed his true colors tonight. The host stared at his desk, at his notes, at the empty chair where his guest had been sitting just minutes ago. For a moment, just a brief moment, you could see something flicker across his face. Was it regret? Realization? It was hard to tell. But then it was gone, replaced by that familiar mask of arrogance. When the show came back from commercial, Piers tried to play it off. He made some joke about difficult guests, tried to paint Jamie as overly sensitive. But it fell flat. The audience wasn't laughing. They weren't buying it. Social media, though we won't focus on what happened after, was already exploding with reactions. But that's not important right now. What's important is what happened in that studio. What's important is that moment when someone finally said enough, when someone finally stood up and refused to be treated poorly for the sake of entertainment. Jamie Foxx walked onto that stage as a guest. He walked off as something more. As someone who knew his worth. As someone who wouldn't compromise his dignity. As someone who showed that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. And Piers Morgan, he learned a hard lesson that night. You can't build yourself up by tearing others down. You can't demand respect while showing none. You can't treat people like they're beneath you and expect them to just take it. The confrontation lasted maybe 15 minutes from start to finish. But in those 15 minutes, everything changed. The power dynamic shifted. The audience chose their side. And one man's refusal to be disrespected became a moment that people would remember. Jamie never returned to that show. He never needed to. He'd already said everything that needed to be said. He'd already made his point. And he'd done it with grace, with dignity, and with the kind of strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are. The empty chair sat there for the rest of the episode, a silent reminder of what had happened. A reminder that actions have consequences. That words have weight. That you can't just say whatever you want without expecting people to respond. Piers tried to continue the show, bringing out other guests, moving on like nothing had happened, but that chair remained empty in everyone's minds. That moment remained fresh. That confrontation remained the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. Because at its core, this wasn't just about a talk show host and his guest. It was about respect. It was about dignity. It was about standing up for yourself when someone tries to tear you down. It was about knowing when to walk away. Jamie Foxx walked off that set with his head held high. He didn't storm off in a rage. He didn't get into a screaming match. He simply stated his truth, called out what was wrong, and removed himself from a toxic situation. That takes strength. That takes character. And Piers Morgan, he sat behind his desk, watching it all fall apart, realizing too late that he'd gone too far, that his need to be provocative, to be controversial, to push boundaries, had finally cost him something. His guest, his audience's respect, his credibility. The studio lights still shone bright. The cameras still rolled. The show technically continued, but everyone knew. Everyone understood. Something had shifted. A line had been crossed, and then firmly redrawn. This was the night a host learned that not everyone will play along with his games. That not everyone will accept disrespect in the name of good television. That some people know their worth too well to let anyone diminish it. Jamie Foxx proved that night that you don't have to raise your voice to be powerful. You don't have to match cruelty with cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful statement is simply refusing to participate. Simply saying no. Simply walking away. And as he disappeared through those studio doors, leaving behind a shocked audience and a humiliated host, he reminded everyone watching of an important truth. You teach people how to treat you. And if someone refuses to treat you with basic respect, you don't owe them your time, your energy, or your presence. The confrontation was over. The interview had ended. But the impact of that moment, of that stand, of that refusal to accept unacceptable treatment, that would last much longer. That would be remembered. That would matter. Because in the end, this wasn't about ratings or publicity or television drama. It was about something much simpler and much more important. It was about dignity. And on that night, in that studio, one man chose dignity